Because I will tase her if necessary.
Uh-oh.
I have the taser.
So we all know Dan Schneider, or as I like to call him, he who shall not be named. He's a famous writer, actor, director, and producer. He's also known as a creepy man with a pretty bad reputation of working with minors. Besides being a creep, Dan Schneider has been responsible for creating and producing some of the most popular children's shows of all time. He's mostly known for working with Nickelodeon from the early 1990s until he was quietly fired in 2018 for all of his crazy allegations. Some of the shows and films that he produced for Nickelodeon included All That, The Amanda Show, Good Burger, Kenan and Kel, Zoey 101, iCarly, Drake and Josh, Big Fat Liar, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, and many others. For these shows to be mostly targeted at children, they sure were pretty inappropriate with a lot of sexual jokes and gross humor. Yeah, I'm surprised that Nickelodeon even allowed these jokes to air on TV. Disney Channel would never. Which, speaking of, I have a whole video on Disney Channel and its rise and fall, so y'all should check that out. Despite having some questionable comedy, He Who Shall Not Be Named was able to create some of the most iconic kids shows that made an impact on myself and millions of other kids around the world. For this video, I wanted to make a ranking of every show he's created for what I think is the worst and to what I think are the best. A quick disclaimer, for this ranking, I won't be including All That, Kenan and Kel, Good Burger, and Big Fat Liar because he actually didn't create those, just served as a writer or producer. I also won't be including Guys Like Us because that show only lasted for one season after being canceled for low ratings and for just being a forgettable show, as well as the Henry Danger cartoon series. Okay, onto the list. So Game Shakers is easily the worst show on this list for obvious reasons. I didn't grow up watching this show, but have seen a couple episodes on accident after a Victorious marathon, and it was something. So Game Shakers is a show about a group of kids who create ideas for their video game app called Game Shakers, and that's pretty much the entire plot. Pretty simple and to the point. Oh, and Kel Mitchell is also here for reasons. I get what they were trying to do here, capitalizing off of video game app culture that was pretty popular amongst kids and teens in the 2010s. Around this time, people were obsessed with games like Angry Birds, Subway Surfers, Temple Run, and Candy Crush, so it only made sense for them to make an entire show based on the overall popularity of video games. I feel like basing a show off of video game apps was pretty creative, as many of the games from the show were actually games the fans of the show could play on the website and on the Nickelodeon app. It just wasn't as popular or as effective as it could have been. And honestly, the writing for this show was just really bad and lazy. The characters weren't memorable and the jokes just weren't good. I know I was an adult in college when this show first came out, but rewatching some clips and episodes for this video, I just found it so hard to get through. Yeah, Game Shakers was a very forgettable and bad show that just hasn't aged well over time. Honestly, this show is just as bad as Game Shakers in my opinion. I know some people actually enjoyed it during its brief time on TV, but it was just unbearable to watch for me. This is a good example of a show that nobody asked for. So Sam and Cat was a spin-off from two of Dan Schneider's biggest shows, iCarly and Victorious. Sam from iCarly and Cat from Victorious. These two were fan favorites from their respective shows for obvious reasons. Apparently, they actually hated each other in real life and didn't get along behind the scenes. There's even some scenes and clips from the show where you can clearly tell that there's some tension going on between the two. Besides the awkward tension, the show was just, como se dice, pretty bad. So Sam and Cat started a babysitting business and move in together with Cat's grandma, and a whole bunch of typical Dan Schneider antics ensue with the cast. This show was just so obnoxious with a lot of really forced comedy and stupid characters, and the writing was just so lazy and bad in every episode.
You cut the pizza into rectangles!
I know what I did. I take geometry.
If you grew up watching the original show iCarly, you know that Sam would never deal with kids, as she actually hates them, so this just feels out of character to me. And they also made Kat's character even dumber in this show. I know she was like this towards the end of Victorious, but it just feels like she became completely brainless in this show. I just didn't like this show and found it to be very unfunny, annoying, and a waste of time. You can tell that Jeanette and Ariana didn't want to be there. Sam and Cat was just a bad show that I never want to see again. Next. So this was a show that a lot of people either forgot about or never heard of. I know I definitely forgot about it. What I Like About You was actually not a Nickelodeon original. Instead, it was on the WB back in the day. Does anybody remember WB? I'm definitely showing my age here because I remember the WB. Anyways, so What I Like About You was a show that starred Amanda Bynes and premiered shortly after the Amanda Show ended. Amanda plays a girl named Holly, and it's just about her everyday life as a young adult finding her way in this world. To be fair, this show is actually not that bad. It's just pretty generic and plain. It feels like it's missing something. Nothing too memorable or noteworthy, but nothing offensively awful. It's just a pretty below average and forgettable coming of age sitcom from the early 2000s. This was another show that I didn't grow up watching because I was an adult when it first came out, but I have seen a couple episodes and clips for making this video. Henry Danger was actually the last show that Dan Schneider produced and created for Nickelodeon before getting fired, and this show actually ended up being one of the most successful sitcoms on Nickelodeon during the 2010s. So Henry Danger was a show about a boy named Henry who becomes a sidekick for a local superhero named Captain Man. They couldn't come up with a better name than Captain Man. I mean, come on now. Anyways, to me this show feels and looks like a mix of Nickelodeon and something that would be on Disney XD. It's giving Lab Rat vibes, if you know what I mean. This being a superhero themed show means that there's a lot of crazy graphics, stunts, action sequences, and physical comedy, which is honestly pretty goofy, but it's a goofy kids show. The show feels cartoonish at times, which is fitting as they actually made a cartoon version of this show. As goofy and cringe as this show is, it does feel very aware of how over the top it is. Everyone seemed to genuinely love being a part of it and making the show, which is refreshing as a viewer, despite a lot of the writing being all over the place at times. All in all, I think Henry Danger was an okay show with a fun premise and okay comedy. So Zoey 101 was a show that I remember enjoying as a kid. It wasn't my favorite show growing up, but I did enjoy it back in the day. Jamie Lynn Spears played the lead character Zoey, and let's be real here, she most likely got this role because of who her sister was back in the day. I just loved how this show was filmed and thought the idea of kids being at this boarding school away from their parents was a pretty creative and fun concept for a kids show. There was definitely a lot you could do exploring the characters and story. I really loved the setting and the characters. Well, most of them. Zoey was probably my least favorite of the main characters, but likable enough where she didn't annoy me or bother me. She was just a plain Jane character. I also loved how most of the show was filmed outside rather than your standard TV set. This allowed for the setting to look and feel more realistic, which was a nice touch. This show was also unique, being the only Dan Schneider show that didn't feature a laugh track, and this helped the show to stand out from anything that was out on Nickelodeon at the time. It definitely felt more like a teen drama than a comedy at times, which was definitely a great change of pace. With that being said, I've always felt like this show was just okay growing up. Not bad and not the best, just okay. It was cool and had a fun premise with some likable characters. It just felt like it was missing something. I don't really know how to explain that, but it did feel a little bland at times, but it was still fun to watch. Does anyone remember The Amanda Show? It's crazy to me to see how long ago this show came out, and it feels like it was just yesterday. It's also crazy how her career has turned out over the years. What once was someone who had a whole bright future ahead of them turned into a shell of herself, which is honestly really sad to see. But anyways, so The Amanda Show was a sketch comedy show similar to All That starred a young and upcoming Amanda Bynes. And this show was on during what many people consider to be the golden age of Nickelodeon. I really loved this show a lot growing up and found it to be just so funny and creative. Literally every character and sketch was just so different from one another. I remember some of the sketches from the show, like the Hillbilly Moment, Prank Calling Mr. Oldman, The Girls Room, Totally Kyle, Blockbuster, which was a parody of the Blockbuster stores, the Judge Judy parody, the commercials, and many more. One of my favorite sketches from The Amanda Show was that Penelope girl. She was a crazy fan that was obsessed with Amanda, starting her own fan club and creating a website, and even tried so hard to meet her and never got the chance to meet her, which was just so funny. Fun fact, I was actually one of those kids that didn't know that Penelope was Amanda until I got a little older. Although I did enjoy this show growing up, it definitely looks and feels like the era it came out in. And a lot of the jokes and pop culture references are extremely dated. Overall, The Amanda Show was still a fun and very unhinged show nonetheless. Now onto the top 3. So Victorious was easily one of Nickelodeon's biggest hit shows. This was honestly one of the last shows I watched on Nickelodeon before I moved on to more mature shows, and I actually really enjoyed this show growing up. This show honestly had one of the best casts from any kids shows in my opinion. So many talented people, from Leon Thomas to Liz Gills and Ariana Grande, which, speaking of, I still can't believe that she was on this show back in the day and now she's one of the biggest pop stars. Like, that's just crazy to me. This show was clearly Nickelodeon's answer to Hannah Montana, which was super popular on Disney Channel a couple years before Victorious came out. Victorious was a musical comedy about a girl named Tori Vega who goes to a performing arts school in LA called Hollywood Arts, where she has dreams of being a big pop star. And I'm sure every kid wanted to go to this school back then. I know a lot of people didn't really like Tori and found her to be boring and an unlikable character, but that's kind of the point. She's a regular girl that gets accepted into this school full of super talented kids, so of course she's not gonna stand out as much. I actually didn't mind Tori that much, but you know, who am I? I love the premise and the setting of the performing arts school and how fun and entertaining the cast was. Side note, I know Tori was the main character of the show, but I wish they allowed more characters like Jade, Kat, Robbie, and Andre to shine and sing lead more of the songs. Overall, Victorious was a very fun and enjoyable show that I still watch every once in a while. iCarly is Nickelodeon's biggest live-action show and was one of my favorite shows growing up. For a show all about internet culture, memes, and viral trends, it actually still holds up really well. The show was cleverly written with some good jokes, fun storylines, and memorable characters. Carly, Sam, Freddie, Gibby, and Spencer were all just so funny and entertaining to watch. Especially Spencer, played by Jerry Trainer, who was basically the Jim Carrey of Nickelodeon. There was never a dull moment on this show. So iCarly was a show about a girl named Carly who ran an online web show with her two best friends, Sam and Freddie. The show was so fun and creative and honestly ahead of its time. It came out during the early years of YouTube and when going viral was still a pretty new concept. This made the show super unique and stand out from other kids shows at the time. I know some people see this show as super obnoxious and over the top, which it's true. It is very loud, obnoxious, and over the top, but the show just has this self-awareness to it, which makes it pretty enjoyable to watch despite it being a bit ridiculous at times. The over-the-top comedy actually really works for a show just like this. iCarly was definitely a fan favorite amongst many kids and one of the biggest shows to come from Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider. But there is one show that I think is just a little bit better than iCarly, and that show is Drake and Josh is easily Dan Schneider's best creation and one of Nickelodeon's best sitcoms ever in my opinion. I loved the show growing up and still rewatch it every once in a while as an adult. There was just something so special about this show to me as a child. Everything about it was just so good. I definitely will make a whole video on this show, so stay tuned for that. Drake and Josh was a buddy comedy sitcom and was one of the most popular shows on Nickelodeon. I even have this weird theory that Disney Channel copied Drake and Josh and created their own version of Drake and Josh with The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. The Sweet Life actually premiered a whole year after Drake and Josh, so somebody definitely stole the idea. But anyways, out of all of the Dan Schneider shows, this one felt the most relatable and realistic to me. The show still had its goofy moments, but just felt more grounded in reality compared to the other shows. So Drake and Josh was about two boys who become stepbrothers and just lived life together as teenagers. Drake Bell and Josh Peck were the perfect choices for the lead roles, as the chemistry between these two was just unmatched and felt so natural. I honestly felt like these two balanced each other so well and nobody felt like they were outshining one another. This show was just so funny and entertaining and I just loved seeing them get into crazy shenanigans each week. I just really love this show and will definitely make a longer video on Drake and Josh in the near future. For many years, Dan Schneider created so many hit shows for Nickelodeon with a wide variety of storylines, characters, and comedy. This man's track list was just insane. Some of his shows actually hold up really well, while others have aged pretty bad over the years. Despite him being a creep with an unusual sense of humor, he was able to produce some of the most popular shows for children's programming, which is pretty commendable. I think Nickelodeon made the right decision with letting this man go. Seriously, he shouldn't be working with minors. I think it's also a good opportunity for other creators to create shows for Nickelodeon. So what did you guys think? Did you grow up on these shows? What was your favorite Dan Schneider show? What was your least favorite? What do you think was the worst Dan Schneider show? And what are your thoughts on the future of Nickelodeon now that he's completely gone? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate each and every one of you all. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more fun videos just like this. See ya!